Good afternoon, everyone. You are all most welcome to the first afternoon session of the 2022 EMCC Global GPS. My name is Shelley and I lead the EMCC Global Program Accreditation team. Setting the scene and paving the way for the next 4 days of engagement and contribution in a World Cafe-style dialogue and reflection is Professor Mary Watts and her esteemed colleagues, Dr. Liz Gooster, Dr. Saiyyidah Zaidi, and Sheldon Daniel. They will be sharing their insights on learning and innovation in the coaching, mentoring, and supervision world, and we are delighted to have them here today. Mary is Emeritus Professor of Psychology at City University of London, where she formerly held the role of Pro-Vice-Chancellor. Mary is also the Program Director and comes very, very experienced for the EMCC Global Accredited Meyler Campbell Mastered Program, formerly known as the Business Coach Program. This was first awarded the EMCC Global Quality Award Accreditation in 2012. I know you will enjoy the session and take much value from it. Following the session will be a networking opportunity. And so I now hand you over to Mary.
Thank you, Shelley, for that lovely introduction, and welcome everybody to this session. And it's wonderful for us to be here, and we're looking forward to learning with you, learning from you, enjoying ourselves and engaging in a stimulating co-creation, thinking about coaching, mentoring and supervision as we move forward, and thinking broadly about what this means for our professional practice. We very much hope that all of the things that we learn together and think about today will contribute to the rest of this event going forward, and indeed well beyond this. And I'm sure that whether you're here now with us or you're going to be viewing this or you're viewing this later on, that there will be a whole lot of fresh thinking, creative thinking that you can take forward during the event and beyond. Now, after a wonderful introduction that I've just had, I think I need to say no more than welcome and thank you, and turn to my colleagues so they can each say a little bit about the session or about themselves. And just as a little bit about format, we will be going between us, and we'll be handing the baton as we think fit. And of course, at this stage, we don't know where that will be, because one can't fully plan or even partially plan for a session like this. And it feels a little bit like starting a coaching session with a new client and thinking, well, where will this take us? And it's both can be a little anxiety provoking and extremely exciting to enter into. So let's turn next to Liz.
Well, thank you, Mary, for kicking us off in such a lovely way. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Liz Gooster. I have my own coaching practice, and I'm a member of faculty for Meyler Campbell, where I have the honour of training senior business people and leaders in coaching skills. So like my fellow panellists here, who we're all on the Meyler Campbell faculty, I'm working with the coaches and the supervisors and the mentors of the future. So really the people who will take our profession forward and co-create how it will look in the future. And while my role might be tutor, and my role is to enable people to learn, I'm not ashamed to say I always learn an immense amount from the people that I work with on the programs. So that's a great bonus to my job as tutor. I like to think of myself as a lifelong learner. I'm always very energized and motivated by learning. I've recently completed a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology, and back in the 90s, which gives away my age, I did a PhD in a completely different subject. And I live in Cambridge in the UK, and that's it. That's enough about me. I'm going to hand on to the next panelist, Saiyyidah.
Thank you, Liz. And I'm delighted to be here. And it's a real honour, actually, to be part of this conversation where we're going to be co-creating that space and having a kind of evolving conversation regarding learning and innovation in coaching, mentoring and supervision. It's wonderful to be part of the faculty and a tutor with Meyler Campbell. It's been one of the most energizing and thought-provoking experiences that I've had, and very nicely sits with the other work that I do in terms of being a convener with the Centre for Belonging and Understanding, where we explore belonging, understanding, identity, leadership and difference. And for me, I think the kind of gift of being here with my colleagues and with you is to explore the future from the perspective of the globe. It's no longer about how we operate as individuals or within our local context. I think the pandemic has created a wonderful space for us to really kind of expand as individuals and together. And with that in mind, I think the last thing I want to share before I hand over to Sheldon is that earlier this year, I completed a doctorate in practical theology where I explored identity, intersectionality and interculturality, and kind of really leaning into that piece of how do we show up and how do we then engage with others, and what's the relationality in coaching, mentoring and supervision. So over to you, Sheldon.
Thank you, Saiyyidah. That's what you've seen with Mary and Liz and then Zaidi. It's just the breadth of the experience that we have at Meyler Campbell that's so rich, and hopefully that comes out today, because I was part of the earlier session, and what it did was just remind me about the breadth and wealth of knowledge and perspectives that we can learn from. Myself, as you would have heard, there's a Caribbean accent sitting behind there, specifically Trinidad and Tobago. I come with a corporate background from oil and gas upstream. And in the last 10 years, I've been doing coaching and consulting along the lines of helping leaders in leadership and communication solve some thorny issues. So that's me. My interest really is in bringing leaders out of a sort of phase of being just technical leaders to being fully rounded, particularly developing communication and social skills, which came out of the session this morning, is so critical to leaders. So thank you for inviting us, and we look forward to a really engaging session.
Thank you all for that. Zaidi, would it be possible to go to our first slide with our title on it, please, just briefly?
It's just there. Perfect.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now, this is just a reminder, and a reminder to you people, and I have to confess also a reminder to me, not of who we are, that bit I've learned, but just of our title and main themes. And a couple of things come through that I'd like to I noticed a chat came through, and I'm guessing that was picked up by the control room just now. So thank you. But please do all of you feel you can engage in any ways you want to, because even if we can't address all of the chats now, they will be there for sharing, and they will also prompt our thinking, because actually the only way this session will work is with your involvement. So, chats, please do send them in. And to my colleagues, you know how hopeless I am if I'm trying to think or follow things and also following chats. But please do, pick up on the chats and, butt in and say, Mary, there's one here that would be really helpful to flag up or to include in these discussions. And apologies ahead that we can't do that with every single one of them, but we will do our best. Now, timings, as you can guess, I'm coming on to say I'm not always so good at that either. And so anybody, please do flag up if things are going for too long in one area. We know perhaps we want to move slightly, so we can keep an eye on how long we have. So I ask each of you, my colleagues here, to keep an eye on the clock as well. Now, moving on to participation, Zaidi is going to, perhaps not, we're going to be doing stuff that will involve all of you in just a moment, but just very briefly, let us show you our second slide. And I have to say, these are here as much for my memory and prompt as for anything. And these are broad themes and topics that we might feel that we want to discuss. They might be completely different ones, but the beginning and the end are likely to be much the same. And Saiyyidah is going to take us through an activity as our next event. Now, is there anybody, Sheldon, Liz, Zaidi, you want to say anything at this stage, or are you comfortable we move on to the activity which can involve everybody?
Just that idea of flow, Mary, that we decided we didn't want to sort of have a fixed structure or agenda, and in that spirit of co-creating with all of you, because we know you're all working in this coaching and supervision and mentor space. So we're here to learn from you as well. So we're not here as experts to tell you the answers on insights in learning innovation. So we kind of really wanted to get into the flow with you guys, and that's why we've called it the flow of our session rather than a structure or an agenda. And all credit to Sheldon for coming up with that lovely flowing image and idea for our session. So I just wanted to share that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. So Saiyyidah, are you okay for the next bit?
Thank you
take
very
us
much.
to your slide and introduce what we're going to be doing.
So everybody, this is an opportunity really to capture your thoughts on where we are before we kind of unpack the conversation that we're going to be having on learning and innovation. And so I invite you to take out your phones or your devices, go to menti.com and put this code in, 6703-8442, and just respond to this question: why are learning and innovation in coaching, mentoring, and supervision important to you? And we will give you a moment or two. And as you're kind of putting your responses in, we'll also open up the screen to actually share, so you can see what our colleagues are putting in response to this question. Why are learning and innovation in coaching, mentoring, and supervision important to you? So over to you. I'll give you a minute or two, and then we'll go over to the responses. It's phenomenal. We're getting some amazing responses in already. Why learning and innovation in coaching important to you? To stay updated, informed, continual growth and responding to a changing world, because my clients are technology leaders, to keep up with trends that my coachees have to deal with. It helps me bring my best and serve my clients more fully, to remain relevant and help your clients grow over a long period of time. Coaching is collaborative and sharing ideas. Our mentees are faster than us. To consolidate, develop the profession. And we'll create a document with these responses in, so that you've got access to all of them afterwards. New opportunities, engagement, to be on top of current issues. Mary, Liz, and Sheldon, I invite you to kind of come in and just share any reflections that you're having as these responses are kind of coming in, and it's wonderful to see so many of them.
It's quite humbling to see all this. I mean, it's so inspiring, and there's so much vitality and thoughtfulness out there, and it's a lot on development, isn't there? Staying alive, inspiring yourself, inspiring clients, learning from clients, what clients need, neuroscience, innovation, staying relevant through innovation. Yeah.
I think the word that's jumping out for me is growth. Quite a lot of people are saying growth. And so just building, Liz, on what you're saying, that, this idea almost that we need as a profession to sort of learn how to be better. And that's never going to end. We will constantly be having to do that. So that word growth is what is striking me.
Into raising standards, I think that's really interesting as well. A lot of people seem to be commenting about, how do we reflect? So just to pick up on what you shared there, Sheldon, in terms of growth, it's growth for improvement, not just growth for growth's sake.
This appetite for creativity and relevance. And someone, it's scrolled up now because there's so many more beautiful responses coming in as well. But someone said to learn is to live, and I think someone else had said before to be alive. So that there's something truly essential about this, isn't there? This is wonderful.
I love this. Someone just put the pressure to use more tools and insights. That's actually interesting, because as we talk about learning and innovation, it's almost as if we do feel a pressure to try to, because of the need to stay relevant and the need to almost keep on top of all these new fandangled trends, there is a pressure. So I think that's a good acknowledgement that some of this comes with a downside.
I find looking at this, just so many questions come whizzing through my mind, because it is so inspiring, this sense of what we want to be, and the creativity around thinking about this and so on. But I find myself asking so many questions around the way we think about learning, the way we think about change, and those questions around achievement, and putting all of this into action in some way. What does that mean in a changing world, in a changing society? And actually, as I'm talking and as I'm thinking, it makes me think actually of EMCC and observing over many years from when it first started, the changes there, and the change over the last few years around what learning in innovation, I think, means within the EMCC, our professional body, or professional body that we've chosen to work so closely with, where they have actually bitten the bullet in many ways and thought about it very carefully in relation to accreditation, both of programs and individuals. So for me, I find it really inspiring that we're getting these comments. And then I think about it within the context of the organisation that we've been invited by to be here, and the way that they are actually leading the way in relation to so much of this. But it still leads me to lots of questions around, somebody used the term earlier about, I think, learning for life, what have you, and something I'd written a note on was similar, how do we best learn for living? How do we best learn from living? And how do those interact?
And as you were saying some of that, Mary, one of the comments that came up from the mentee was to raise standards. And obviously that's a big, one of the core threads of EMCC, raising standards through the accreditation programs and the CPD, and also for us on the panel. I mean, that's part of our ethos through Meyler Campbell, is to really deliver sort of rigorous learning, isn't it? And that's why what energizes so many of the people who we work with is that drive to learn, and not just the professional development, but also the personal development, which circles back to Sheldon's point that you picked out, Sheldon, about the growth. And there is that sort of transformational growth sometimes, isn't there, as well, for ourselves as well as the client. So I'm loving so many of these comments that are coming through there. There's one there. Every time we say something comes up to back it. Growth as a practitioner to better serve his clients. It's wonderful.
I'm going to suggest that maybe we kind of come back to the mentee later on and kind of continue the conversation and the collaboration. So I'm just going to go back to the slides. Here we are. So thank you to everybody for your responses. I mean, it's just been absolutely incredible and expanding. and we will come back to those. So just back to the flow. Mary, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, but I guess we can all, no, I've lost the slide. I will move on to it on another screen.
It's back up.
It's back up.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So many things have come up in that Menti slide that you were looking at, Saiyyidah. Now, as we said, this flow model here is really just looking at some things that came to our minds to prompt thinking and discussion. But please, in your chats, if you send in other things as well. But learning and innovation, yes, that's our title, and a lot of things came up in relation to that. Big issues we put there, because there are so many big issues around how one can start to move forward in relation to these important things that you've been flagging up. So one for me is, well, there are many of them, but for example, it would be a big issue if everybody were putting forward these ideas, coming back to the professional body issue again, but the professional body was inadvertently acting in ways that, really was damping down or depriving the opportunity for some of these things to be achieved, because professional bodies are so powerful. But of course, there are many other big issues and many other ways that one can think about achieving or finding obstacles. Hopes and dreams. Many of your hopes and dreams, I think, have come forward. Isn't it interesting? Asked to look at why it's important, and really hopes and dreams have come to the fore. And we can talk a little bit more about those if this is what people would find helpful. Now, actions. We've had lots of hopes and dreams coming forward, but how on earth do we start to move forward to continue the work that EMCC and other organisations are inspiring us to do? And then when we come to our reflective learning and innovation, that's actually how we might bring things together with everybody's help here, and returning back with Zaidi for that. So that really is just a little bit of a prompt of some of those topics. Now, if I may, I'll go back to our panel, but I hope that we can start looking at the chats and seeing what's coming in from all of you that we might address as we're going through. I think that's rather important. So, Zaidi, is there anything that you would like to say, taking us forward now?
Thank you, Mary. I think for me, one of the kind of really interesting and inspiring things about this whole conversation about the future and the how we kind of tap into the changes that are happening in the way that we learn is the opportunity. And so, for example, artificial intelligence has something that could be potentially quite destructive in some respects for the whole way that coaching, mentoring and supervision is undertaken. But what I think it also offers is this space where some of the kind of more logistical things can get picked up by the use of AI. And then it's, who are we as coaches and as mentors and supervisors, and how do we lean into more of our essence? And as we do that, we're actually directly supporting our clients to be able to do the same. And I think that's just a delightful opportunity in terms of us being able to be more of who we are, to support clients to be more of who they are, and then use that to expand and grow the organizations and the teams within which they work.
I think that this conversation about learning and innovation is so critical because there's so much change going around, at least from the sector that I know best, which is the business sector. Markets are becoming different. Things are becoming much more international, and our leaders are having to face organizations where culture, cross-cultural issues are becoming really important when leading these big organizations. So markets, mindsets are changing. We have the Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, they are going to respond to very different stimuli and have a different way of accumulating information. When we as coaches respond in that space, we have to make sure that we are speaking in a language and in a way that's actually responsive to their needs. Recently, I had a coaching session with a younger person, and we ended up, as their action, to develop a Spotify playlist, which they were quite excited about, and it's the only thing they've ever done as homework to come back in, because it was actually something fun, and it helped sort of describe a process that they were having struggling describing in words. So being able to sort of reach the mindset that we're dealing with, the method will have to change. Saiyyidah sort of hinted at it there, because we are moving into a world where AI will offer opportunities. I mean, imagine doing a visualization via the metaverse. That would be fascinating, where you take people literally through a very different world and have them help do a visualization. And finally, the mode in which we do it. Obviously, again, technology will allow us to deliver our work differently. So market, mindset, method, and mode. That's how my brain tries to simplify what learning and innovation we should focus on as coaches, mentors, and supervisors.
Sheldon, would you like to say those 4 again, please?
So
your M's you've just mentioned.
Yes, markets being different sort of geographical areas almost, but also different industries, because industries are growing in different parts, going into different parts of the world, different industries, different mindsets, different methods, and different.
You want to say something about mindsets now?
Well, just that the fact is, I think post-pandemic, we are dealing with a world, those of you who were there this morning, I'm repeating slightly, but we're dealing with a world where leaders are required to be much more human, much more involved in engaging and enrolling than they would have been expected before. Employees have now had a taste of that, and it's not to be expected that leaders will now roll back and go to old styles. So leaders are being pushed to do things that they were not necessarily trained to do or didn't actually get promoted because they were doing. And as coaches, we sort of have to make and hold a space for them to be extremely vulnerable, because in a way, a lot of what leadership is being asked to do is a very human thing. And to change, to become that, requires a lot of risk-taking. So I think we must be very mindful of leaders, of the new demands of leaders, and giving them space to deal with those demands.
And then your last one, Sheldon?
Mode, meaning that the AI and technology being the way that we will use or deliver coaching, a very specific part of coaching, as Saiyyidah, why did I call you Saidi? Saiyyidah said, where, there are very special things that we will do as humans, and technology will take the other bits. And knowing where that special essence of what we give as coaches will be important as we try to play this interplay between technology and human interface.
Thank you. I must say I rather like that as pegs to hang some of the thinking upon, or a framework for thinking. So thank you. And if I may just add one thing, then for me, in terms of markets, as I sit here, I've actually got quite a few pictures on my screen now of who's here, and I'm certainly not the only one with grey hair or whiting hair. And I wonder if something that you said once, Sheldon, made me think of this, that perhaps we have a tendency to focus on the areas that relate to us and our lives. Yours is very much now what's relating to your life and what you do, and where you're living, what you're working on, and your age, and so on. And we were in a conversation. I was saying, well, I need these slides to help me when I have a senior moment. They're as much for me as they are for everybody else here. And then I started to think, well, how much attention do we pay to generational issues, for example, whether younger or whatever? But made me realize that there's I'm supposedly sort of fairly specialist in learning as a psychologist and research and so on, but it changes vastly as you get older. But it doesn't mean that you can't do things. It's just that somehow we have to rethink and relearn. But what does that mean for coaching and coaches? It's almost a whole new field of thinking and research. So your M's I find rather useful because, there are markets that I think could easily be forgotten. There are mindsets that maybe we sometimes need to challenge ourselves about that, I carry around, that you probably carry around. Maybe the methods for doing our coaching, and certainly my methods for doing things now, like an event like this, I've had to think vastly differently. I know there are things that, I find more difficult than perhaps some years ago. And then mode of coaching. Again, we can think about our population, both in terms of generation, but also more broadly, people with autism, for example. We may need a totally different style and way of thinking and coaching. So thank you for your 4 M's, Sheldon.
It's my simple mind trying to just make everything down to something memorable.
Well, having a simple mind and a poor memory now, then that works well for me.
It's brilliant, Sheldon. If I may come in, I think what this conversation has done is inspiring me the kind of theme of risk taking, because I think that risk taking is something that is common in all 4 of those, markets, mindsets, methods, and modes. And as we take risks as coaches in terms of the tools that we're using, being able to take the risk of exploring, well, how do I lean within to explore vulnerability and kind of discuss mental health and anxiety at a higher level with our clients? It's a risk for us, but it opens the opportunity for kind of insights and expansion to take place in all of these areas. And another piece that's coming to me in terms of what Mary's saying around exploring conversations that are difficult is the one regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for many coaches, it's a big risk in terms of leaning into difference. And I suppose where I'm coming to on that is this notion of extreme vulnerability and supporting our clients to kind of be leaders who are able to operate in a world that is vulnerable requires us to be more vulnerable as well as the leaders within the coaching space. And by us, I mean everybody that is within this room. I think EMCC is doing a tremendous job in terms of creating this conversation so that we can lean into how to be vulnerable.
Pick up on a few of those things. I've got all kinds of things buzzing through, and I can also start to see some lovely questions coming through. So it would be nice to spend some time looking at some of those in a moment. But just some initial thoughts from me prompted by, well, the mentee and also what you have shared so far, and some of the comments as well on AI. And I think for me, it starts to bring up a bit of a tension around some of those issues. So I'm sort of pulled into a bit of a conflict space because, like so many people on the mentee, I do get excited about innovation and the possibilities and the opportunities. And actually, I've started thinking as well, people we're talking in the mentee about using technology for being more creative, having more fun in client sessions. I think these are amazing. And one of my, and Saiyyidah, you just mentioned there about diversity and inclusion, and I wholeheartedly believe that coaching should become more accessible, more democratized, accessible to more people, more inclusive, more diverse. And a lot of the ways that might be possible could be through new innovation and new ways of applying technology to sort of scale up access to coaching, and all of that is brilliant. But then the little niggle, the little tension for me that comes up is it possible to use, I'm talking about sort of scaled up and AI and some of these technologies, is it possible to still offer through some of those modes, actually, to use one of Sheldon's M's, to offer that sort of truly tailored and bespoke and personalized learning experience that I feel kind of is characteristic of good coaching and mentoring and supervision. Can you get that transformational learning? Can you get those personal connections and those insights and, you know, those lovely light bulb moments that we all talk about? Maybe we can. Maybe that's the opportunity that lies ahead of us. And to your point, Mary, but is it just because we're not accustomed to the technology? And I've covered up my grey hair with artificial help, but I'm also not a digital native. So part of me is thinking maybe the stuff just needs to be there and we'll be able to use it. I mean, I guess 5 years ago, I probably wasn't convinced that coaching online would be the same or as effective. And I'm an utter convert. I've had some of my most sort of emotional and powerful coaching has been online in the last two or 3 years. So I'm totally converted to that. So maybe the technology, we just need to have faith and innovate and it will be there. So part of me is a bit skeptical. Part of me thinks, okay, we just need convincing. And then I think to pick up someone else said something about the risk to our profession from technology. And I suppose there is also that if technology sort of could we be replaced as coaches by technology? So maybe that's me just getting sort of protective of our own role in these spaces. But I think probably on balance, my kind of love of learning and the kind of being drawn to the possibilities, I'm certainly curious to see what unfolds in this space and what ideas we have. But I think I won't go onto it now, but one of the other threads in my mind is the human connection. And so for me, I suppose it's how we're using AI and technology and anything that we innovate in that space. How can we use it in service of human connection rather than a sort of a replacement? So that's probably where that sort of brings me at this point.
Sparking some thoughts in my mind. Thank you, Liz. And it's brilliant because you're reminding me of where I was a few years before the pandemic. And I think that the general upskill that has taken place, not just with us as coaches, but also with leaders, because they're now more confident in using, for example, tools like Zoom and Teams. And that then means that I think, so to respond to the question of how is the response to tech going to happen, I kind of put down a note saying that I think that these tools provide us with increased access and more opportunity. So before, somebody who wanted coaching and either couldn't afford it, and I'm talking about either financially or time, now is able to actually fit in coaching sessions. And I suppose the thing that's coming to me is the kind of 80 or 90% rule. And I'm a firm believer that coaching online is a different experience to coaching in person. But the question then is different in what way? You know, and so as you said, Liz, you know, some of the breakthroughs that take place when we work either as individuals or in groups online, I suppose the thing that kind of keeps me in working online is because they wouldn't have happened otherwise, because that person might not have had that session. And so I think that's the use of these tools in some ways is a really big stretch for us as coaches. You know, I mean, I didn't know how to use many of the things that I'm using today. But so the question then is, in terms of learning, is our development learning about coaching and the process of coaching, or is it also about the tools and the tech that's available? I think the other thing about working online is I've witnessed a vast range of people being able to have access. So, for example, this is a very international conference, and it's wonderful for me to witness. If it had taken place in one country, I think the kind of demographics would be very different. So this creates that. And I suppose the thing on human connection is a really fascinating one, because that's something that I'm still playing with. And I've realized that in order for me to know how to do that, I've learned facilitation skills. And I think facilitation is different to coaching. So it's kind of understanding where you are in terms of the skills that you maybe need to, or are thinking that you want to explore a little bit further, and allowing yourself or giving yourself permission for it to be messy so that you can learn those things, just as we would advise our coaching clients, you know. So it's I suppose it's taking a little bit of the advice that we would give.
Could I be a bit of a devil's advocate now, perhaps? And I just pausing and reflecting, and sort of questions come to mind. One is almost implicitly some of the ways we're talking about things and thinking how they could be thought about or construed. And the way we're talking about leadership such a lot as a key thing in our coaching. And yes, that is important, but so are many other things to be thought about in relation to coaching. But if we stick with the leadership, this leadership, helping people to be leaders in the sense of leading others, but actually, is it perhaps not equally or more important as well in working with people to help people to be better leaders of their own lives? So many people say, well, I'm not a leader, and they get missed out on things. But actually, we're all leadership's for everybody. We're all leaders in one way or another. And I think coaching is for everybody. And when we talk about leadership coaching, implicitly, we often make that jump to thinking about, we see these people in organizations who are leading. But in my self-coaching now, I'm trying to help myself be a better leader of myself as I, move into new eras and new ways of being and so on. And maybe that is rather important. So that's one thing I'm just being a bit of a devil's advocate on, that we don't forget to think about that. And I forgot what the other thing was already. I should come back to it in a minute. I knew what it was now, sorry. And the other thing is, implicitly as we talk, I see ourselves in a coaching session, because that term comes up quite a bit. And obviously that's what most of us are doing. We're doing coaching or mentoring or supervision, and it might be with individuals or with groups. But in my dreams, I actually think about the power of coaching in a much bigger, broader context. How can coaching be used in terms of its thinking and its ways of changing dynamics politically? Some people might say maybe we shouldn't even be thinking about that, but how can we as coaches, with the insights and understandings we have, make a difference to the bigger society? And yes, it can be done by working with individuals who go out and do that. But can we, as we move forward as a profession, think about how we might be heard and how we even create our own voice around really important issues? For example, we might, in relation to climate change, that's just one of them. So I suppose some of these more social and big picture issues, I puzzle over and think, how do we start to make profound change in the way we live? And I think then we need coaching at different levels and different types of activity. And I've no answers, but I've got lots of questions. But one of the things I think I've focused on and learnt during my career is that we can spend a lot of time answering questions, but unless we ask the right questions first, we actually don't progress. So, perhaps asking the questions and being, I don't know the answers, but these I feel might be important questions, even when some people might get upset at the questions or laugh at the questions. So, sorry, taking it to think a bit more broadly.
Mary, that's very in tune with one of the questions we've had from Esther Zerbal. I think Esther Zerbal. And I think you've asked you made a couple of points, but one there that Esther, not in the political space, but Esther had a question: how can we infuse coaching into colleges and offer in parentheses, team coaching opportunities to students, so they too can grow even before they enter the professional world. So that really nicely picks up your musing there, Mary, about different spheres and leaders, not necessarily in the sort of traditional business sense. So yes, that's just one comment, but obviously people are already thinking more broadly.
Thank you for that question, Esther. And it's a question that maybe we can't begin to answer it here, but the most important thing is that people can carry the questions both through these 4 days into their sessions that they're joining and beyond. Is there anything else in the chats that you want to pull out?
There's quite a lot coming through, and just on that point, before I go into there again, that the leader, when you said, Mary, about it's about leading yourself as well, and to Esther's question about, I mean, it's going back even younger, because something that I get really hopeful, we think about hopes and dreams for the future, is that I do see signs and trends that some of the sort of language and the concepts that we work with are becoming a bit more mainstream. And I'm not giving exclusive credit to coaches. We can probably take some, but there's other things. But some of these things are coming into coming mainstream. We've seen them in social media, television. But in the education space, one of the things that I've been so excited about, my daughter is 5 and she's just started reception. And they've got this whole leader in me sort of approach, and they're drawing values from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of them is, and they're doing them in age appropriate terms, but seek first to understand. So the whole listening piece, sharpening the saw about how to look after mind and body. So it gives me so much hope that actually these concepts can go way beyond coaching, given the right sort of headwind, tailwind, or whatever's the more accurate thing. So I loved Esther's comment there, and then it just fit very fortuitously, Mary, with your observation, because I do feel if people are learning some of these concepts and sort of internalizing these learning and innovation and personal development pieces, that there is a lot of opportunity in the future. And I'm just now searching through to see if there are any other relevant questions, but I'm sure Saiyyidah and Sheldon probably want to jump in now, having heard some of those points.
But Liz, there was just one question that flashed on the screen. There's lots of them, but there's one I noticed that, and the person said, because I haven't got the whole chat in front of me, because I haven't got technical, for some reason I haven't got them going down my screen at the side, and now's not the time to remind myself how to do that, so I see them as they're popping up. But somebody has said, maybe we could just take a moment's pause, because there are so many chats, but just to reflect for a moment, to personally catch up with all of the discussion, but also maybe to look at some of the chats. I don't know if other people would like, just a moment when the talking stops and we stop, and you have a chance to just reflect or think or look at the chats, just for sort of perhaps 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. I mean, if you think that would be helpful, then please do give us an indication. I've seen a few nods there. So why don't I just stop talking for a moment, and we can all do that and give people a chance to think.
Can I just address one question that at least struck me? I think, Inez, you asked the question about bringing some awareness and clarity about how the coaching discipline can be augmented or assisted and not replaced by AI. I heard that as you asking for maybe a bit more specificity about what it could do. So I just want to share what I think where AI can help. It can range from things like scheduling, obviously, but also sending reminders to clients about commitments they may have made, and keeping track of that. If it is that the issue is about them sort of keeping mindful of agency and the things they're doing on a day-to-day basis. There may be automatic reminders that can be sent to them using apps like that. If you've gotten to the space of mindfulness, it might actually tell them, take a moment at this point in time to sort of retreat and gather your thoughts. It could be a way of sharing resources jointly with your group or specifically for that person's issue. It can be, if we get even more high tech, about how we use visualization. Some of the visual aids that we would use in coaching to help people think through things, you can actually now begin to think about that being the person being immersed in an augmented reality space that allows them to sort of traverse terrain and think about it in a more immersive way. So it's not just technology like using Zoom and all that. It is actually using it to sort of create routine functions, make that a bit more, take that away from the actual coach and let that interface be with an app or some sort of website that might be relevant. So that's where I know. I mean, other people may know how technology might be used, but that's how I see it. Inez, I see you have your hand up. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right.
Yes, thank you, Sheldon, and glad to be part of this session. Is incredible. In my perspective, especially younger leaders, they might believe that the app actually replaces, or it's like a self-practice, self-managed practice.
Right.
And I believe a body of, as Andres said before, the body like EMCC and other coaching bodies can help increase awareness about the differences. For example, there's still confusion in potential, even in coaches, but in potential coachees about the differences in coaching, in mentoring, in supervision. So increasing awareness about those differences, and that, as you beautifully described it, Sheldon, it's a perfect support to the connection, because the human connection, even if it's not in presence, I agree that there are some devices that help a lot, that like the camera, like having no interferences, so no multitasking. I absolutely agree. Bringing clarity, I believe, and awareness, I believe it would help a lot, because we've seen that 20 years ago that there was a misperception about coaching in organizations because they've had a bad experience before and they didn't even know what they were contracting, right? So that's my reflection. I have the answer. I have the question. I don't have the answers yet.
Thank you. That certainly gives us some more to reflect upon. Saiyyidah, is there anything you want to add to this conversation? If not, don't worry. Not right at this moment. Otherwise, please do.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's interesting just kind of reflecting on what Innes is saying. And Sheldon, earlier you referred to Spotify. So it's kind of making me think, well, some of the tools that we're using might not quite be artificial intelligence, but actually they are still tech-based. And it's thinking, well, how do we incorporate those? Because I love that idea of kind of saying to your client, if appropriate, create a Spotify playlist. You know, there's the other day I started to do meditations for a client, and I just said, well, rather than send you the file, I uploaded Spotify, and it just makes it easier for me and it's easier for them in terms of receiving it and using this. So I think what you're kind of reminding me of is how can we use or expand our use of the tools that we might be using personally in our lives, things that we weren't using a few years ago.
Okay.
So lovely. And it's just, that is really speaking to me in terms of that. There's quite a few people in the chat, and forgive me because they've gone past, I can't remember everyone's name, but a few people have been talking about just to paraphrase, sort of meeting the clients where they are in terms of the what and the how of technology. And Saiyyidah, you've made me think about that as for us as well as the coaches and supervisors and mentors, and being, I guess, brave and taking that risk. And we're all in different places, aren't we? I mean, I'd never seen Mentimeter before we started talking about it for this session, Zaida. And now, you know, I've had it on my phone. I love it. You know, I've not been so excited for ages. In fact, seeing everyone's ideas coming through on screen, I just thought that was a fabulous way of gathering ideas quickly. For you, that's old hat now. But we're all sort of starting from different places, aren't we? Both as the professionals and the clients, and obviously, you know, the clients could, someone put in the chat that their 12-year-old is the tech leader in their house, and he and his wife are the followers, which is just a lovely example of that sort of reverse mentoring, isn't it? You know, we see the parental role as teaching our children, but they have so much to teach us. And I guess, as we said I certainly said in my introduction, learning from the people that we work with, it's just becoming even more clear in my mind that this meeting people where they are, and that we need to push ourselves, which I guess is what we're talking about in the innovation, and we can learn from the clients, because they might bring stuff they're using already to that thinking space, and that it can go in a sort of mutual way, can't it? So that there's so many really rich chats going on that are sort of teasing into these questions. Yes, it was S. Johnston who said about the technology leader in the house. Yeah, coaching does not just stop with the client. They take their learnings into the workplace and family. And this is Eileen. So that sort of cascade, Eileen Duncan, that's a lovely observation about that effect. And I guess it goes back to Esther's point about how do we get this outside the professional workspace and beyond the leaders. So I find that quite reassuring. It's not all on us. There's the cascade effect. We do our piece and then it spreads. It's like almost waves of knowledge and learning and innovation, if that makes sense.
I mean, Liz, Saiyyidah, and Mary, I don't know if you find it fascinating, but I have, that once we start talking about learning and innovation, it seems as if we move to technology. And there is so much more, at least in my head, about learning and innovation that's not about technology. For instance, we all now, I think, realize that some non-traditional thought influences will creep into the way we coach. 5 years ago, if we had said mindfulness in business coaching, people would say, no, that's life coaching, right? Now, actually, because of the pandemic and because of the questions that a lot of our clients are bringing up in sessions, then things like mindfulness and gratitude become a part of the conversation of senior executives. So I just want to add that in, that, it's fascinating when we talk innovation, it goes to technology, but I also think that innovation has to do with method, the way we bring the tools we bring to coaching that must be influenced by what is out there, what's going on out there, as much as technology.
Thank you, Sheldon, for the reminder of that. And as you're speaking, it's a reminder to me, try not to plug the psychology all the time, but being a psychologist, thinking about all of those psychological factors that go way beyond the learning psychology of years ago when we thought about Pavlov and his dogs and Skinner and pigeons and rats and so on. But there's so much more in learning theory now, both children's and adults' learning theory, that I think we can't afford to ignore. And, if you think about how mindfulness works, you can track it back and think, well, what's actually going on here in terms of processes, psychological processes? Where are we inadvertently, perhaps through the way we talk with our clients, reinforcing mindsets that actually we haven't given them a chance to explore and see maybe there are alternative mindsets. You use the term mindsets in your 4 M's, Sheldon, and that's a wonderful area to start thinking, well, where do these mindsets come from? Where might they be being used where it's not really obvious, but they're actually holding somebody back? So I think that it's a powerful reminder, Sheldon, and thank you. And it goes beyond technology, it goes beyond techniques, although techniques, many of them have been derived from more recent psychology and psychology research. And we need, I suppose what it's saying to me is that we need these continual collaborations, because coaching crosses so many boundaries of knowledge and understandings, and we can't possibly be expert in all of them. But we can have open minds and interests and learn about particular areas and then share them, as we are doing here, and as you'll continue to do throughout this event and beyond.
And Mary, if I can just come in there, just
Yes.
reflecting on what Sheldon said, and then your thoughts about kind of the mindfulness. One of the things that I started to do is explore with my clients the data that they're collecting on their smartwatches. And it's fascinating because that information is already there, but I haven't necessarily seen it. I certainly, in my experience, I didn't bring it into the coaching sessions before. And so if anxiety is high or if sleep isn't enough, I ask them to kind of review the data that they have already in their smartwatches. And that, I think, is helping to lean into this space of how can they have alternative mindsets. And it's just been delightful watching the way that they kind of work out how they're going to process the information that is already available to them without asking them to do anything different.
Good thinking there. Right, now, we've got a few more moments before we turn back to Saiyyidah again, assuming I'm looking at the clock correctly. Is that right, Saiyyidah?
Yeah, or I was thinking actually that the previous mentee kind of created such a rich conversation that I wonder what your thoughts are about just going to that now and then kind of seeing what comes up and expanding that. What do you think, Mary?
I think it would be quite fascinating if everybody's open to that. So actually, you've got a question ready if people would like to do it. That's just a slightly different one to the original one, isn't it?
It is.
Let's have a look at that. And if people are willing to respond to that on their Mentimeter again, then we can very rapidly pull all of that together. It gives everybody a chance to come back in again, doesn't it? And then we can look through the responses.
Yeah. Can I just pick up Alison's one quick? Alison said, after playing Mozart to a client in China the other day, and we've agreed that the next time she will share some of her favorite music with me. So again, an example of somebody using, a different way of coaching to sort of get responses out. Sorry, Mary, I just
that's a lovely example, isn't it? And as you say, another mode that is very creative to be able to share some of that creativity here. So, Saiyyidah, if you can put your next slide up, I can see it sort of in a small square, but will it go up on the screen like we had it before when we had the big one? That's it, lovely. Thank you. And then take us through this one.
Thank you, Mary. So essentially exactly the same process. If you can just kind of think and reflect on your responses to the question of taking account of the conversation that we've had just now. Why is learning and innovation in coaching, mentoring and supervision important to you now, given some of the themes that we've unpacked, some new questions that may have come up for you, and we'll give you a couple of moments just to kind of pop your ideas into the Menti, and I'll go over to that in a second. And responses are coming in now. Someone said to expand our abilities to support the transformation our coachee wants or needs. Someone else saying the art of learning.
Lovely, the art.
Increased accessibility in creating equality in learning. Challenging my assumptions and thinking, preparing for the unknown and unexpected. I love that.
Yeah. because that's your client. That's the world of your client, right?
Absolutely. It's an instrument to expand our own view of the world. Again, I think there's a theme coming up actually about learning. Oh, so we don't get gobbled up by the tech at the cost of our capacity to be in relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Please come in and share any of your thoughts, Liz, Mary, and Sheldon.
I liked that one that you just highlighted there, Saiyyidah, because it sort of captures where I was going, looking through some of the comments in the chat as well about different ways of learning and innovating in that space other than the tech. And a few people have been talking about spirituality and presence and the journeys into our own self-awareness. And that's something that's speaking to me a lot. So that really resonates, the not being gobbled up by tech because I started off with the human connection, and this has sort of taken me around into different directions, and it's bringing me back. And also to something you said, Saiyyidah, at the very beginning about I don't think you used the word authenticity. It was on my essence. I think you used that essence of being with each other. So I've sort of, it's so interesting because we've gone down the whole Mentimeter and the Spotify and the AI and lots of these things which have really got the cogs whirring. I think where I'm settling is back in the space of the human connection as well. And I'm not discounting those other ways because there might be roots to that, but this being at the core. So I'm loving seeing the art of learning, pushing boundaries, connect with clients and each other as coaches, multiple modalities. There's something
but I
really
think
quite deep and rich.
I think, Liz, just to give yourself credit, I think you pointed out, and it seems to be sort of influencing what people are saying about reaching your clients where they are technology-wise, about us sort of responding to a changed technology world, and our clients are sort of current with that. So as coaches, we have to sort of find a way to connect with that world. Somehow, I don't know, maybe I'm just seeing something that's not there, but I think people are sort of finding that joy now of almost like what we do and what the market is doing, and sort of relating it as a way of becoming more effective by doing that. So technology, not just for the sake of technology, but technology because our clients are using it in different ways.
There's so many. I hope we're going to have a way of capturing the chat with the recording, because there's so many rich reflections and sort of questions, not expecting an answer, but I think posing them to everyone. Peter, you said becoming aware of the lens through which we are seeing the world. That's in response to someone else. The lovely conversations. How can we better come to our own edge? And I guess we're thinking about that learning edge there, Peter. And then someone else has echoed that. You're asking a great question. Make the question our task. People are talking about using podcasts into coaching, bringing them into coaching conversations. It's really ranging up and down the different modes, to use one of your beautiful M's, Sheldon.
And Yvonne's comment in the chat actually is really interesting, because she said she has a client who wants low tech and they have tele coaching sessions. And I love that, because before Zoom and Skype and all of this, often coaching sessions would actually happen over the phone. And I think that as a coach, that kind of, you have to be more present with the listening, because that's all you have. So it's kind of like even going back to what one might call low tech enables us to kind of use different skill sets that we have, and reminds us, perhaps we need to listen a bit more carefully. Whereas if we're working over Zoom, then we can kind of sense the being of that person, and in person you get the energy and everything else as well. And how are we operating in those different spaces to the main screen?
Look at that one. We don't need tools if we don't understand each other. So again, that coming back to the core basis of these relationships of coaching and supervision and mentoring.
Just fascinated watching these, and find it really, not quite sure what the word is, but quite exhilarating and humbling when I look at the themes running through, but I look at the openness of, all of you people who've written these things, who're saying, the theme of learning coming through, learning and growth, but the notion of learning and like acknowledging the complexity of that and rethinking what does it mean within the coaching relationship. And actually more broadly is coming through. Challenging assumptions, somebody's written challenging my assumptions, expanding my view of the world, is another one. And then one I think is really rather important, access to learning. We make an assumption that access is there, and often it isn't. So I think, how do we think about that? Both creating different modes for access, and how do we help somebody in their mind to recognize, the need for access to learning and almost redefine learning? Because for some people, either I know enough or they see it as what they were learning when they were at school. And I think not just our clients, but I do think maybe as coaches, it's very easy to get into that kind of mindset. There's another one about sort of recursive rethinking. What a lovely way to start thinking about reflection. Because I don't know about others of you, but sometimes it's very easy we talk about reflection, but we don't really say what we're thinking about in regard to reflection. And reflection can lead us in different directions, sometimes useful, helpful ways, other times probably not. But recursive rethinking, I think, is a lovely term. Another one talking about the lens through which we see the world. And again, we hope that our clients, whoever they may be, will be open to thinking about those lenses. But of course, it's a skill and an open-mindedness we need as well to think about our own lenses. So just about everything I'm reading in here is asking those questions. These are things that might seem important. They might be, interestingly, I've got on my screen, on the other little computer, I've got the flow and the big issues, number 3 on that, big issues. I think these big issues are coming through because we've had the kind of conversation we had and that we've had your inputs absolutely from the beginning. The big issues are coming through. One might have thought we'd got the big issues when we had the earlier discussions, when we started to talk about AI or this or that. And if we'd have stopped at that, we wouldn't be where we are now and have what's coming up. So we needed some issues to prompt our thinking. But I think now we're looking at some rather fundamental big issues around the way we coach, but thinking about ourselves as well as our clients. And had we got another hour and a half, we would probably be able to move on to spending more time to lead us to something similar as this in relation to actions, because actions will follow, won't they? But again, I think that's another whole area of debate. How does one think about actions in relation to these rather important ideas, creative ideas that are coming up now? So my mind is buzzing. We have a few minutes left, 10 minutes left now. As Saiyyidah said, we will, the system with this better than any of us, Saiyyidah, but there'll be a way of drawing this together, won't there, I guess, so that people can actually, in their own time, like that person who said on a chat earlier, can we have a bit of space, please? Perhaps we can get these together so people in their own time can have space. And the slides, I hope, will be available, because certainly in my own space to look at these, I will start thinking about, I've got some hopes and dreams, but where might I personally move in relation to actions? How can I think about my own reflective learning in innovation? I saw you nodding, so that's a yes side where I take it.
Absolutely. I'll capture all of these from both questions, and we'll be able to share them with everybody, because there's so much rich learning in here, and even afterwards people will be able to kind of come back to the second question and just share other responses if there's something else that they want to add. But I think for now I'm going to just kind of move away from the mentee so that we can draw the session to a close. So thank you, Mary, and thank you, everyone.
Yes, well, thank you, Saiyyidah. It's totally new to me using the Mentimeter, and it's been brilliant. Thank you. And I can't resist saying that as well, particularly in the past, but certainly now at an individual level as a researcher, the couple of things I jotted down here now around learning new ways and allowing creativity. And to be creative, we learn new ways. We also have to engage in recursive rethinking. And as George Kelly, the psychologist, said, we can't be creative unless we can loosen our construing. And what he meant by that is loosen the constructs that we hold, the way we make sense of life, the if I do this, then this type question. You know, we make assumptions, we presume and we assume, and we often don't question. And unless we can loosen some of that, which has come through in so many of these responses now to showing, you know, the recursive rethinking, the seeing through different lenses, loosening our construing, we won't be able to learn new ways. We'll be stuck with the old. We won't be able to be creative. And I couldn't resist just writing down a little bit there. One person put stay awake. And I wasn't quite sure if they meant they were struggling to stay awake during this, but I hoped they meant, or the way I saw that was staying awake is staying alive. You know, it's awake to the world we're in. So I'm sorry I don't know the name of the person who put that down, but I loved it, and it fits beautifully in with the whole of this thinking. I shall have two little words take away with me that summarizes it all. We can go through life sleeping, or we can go through life staying awake.
Well, I think that is a wonderful moment to end the session, Mary. And I don't know, am I interrupting prematurely, or is there anything else?
I'd just like to ask Liz, if I may,
Sure.
if there's any rounding off that you would like to bring to this now.
I was just going to say very much what you just said, Mary. I mean, I actually feel quite overwhelmed. There's so many ideas, and picking up on your loosening the assumptions there is, I think that's what all of you have done just fabulously well today. I mean, certainly loosening can feel some of my own assumptions loosening, but also I think just that openness that people have brought has made this such a rich session. We said at the beginning we wanted it to be a flow rather than a structure, and I feel we've really got into the flow of things. I wish we had hours more, but I know we need to draw to a close. But I think the thing that's come across loud and clear to me is just that learning and innovation, that power of collaborating and co-creating learning, and today doing this across different geographies, different professions, different spaces, different everything. This is where the power that drives our future lies, I think, doing these co-creative things. So it's been wonderful. I'm delighted that we were invited. Collaborating with my panelists in advance was amazing, and being here today with all of you has just taken it to another level. So it's been wonderful for me. I hope it's been even half as wonderful for everyone else, and we just wanted to say thank you so much for coming, for that openness in sharing, and for making it such a rewarding session. And there's been a couple of questions in the chat about sharing the Menti data. As Saiyyidah said, she will enable that for all of us, and hopefully that we can get the chat to you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Saiyyidah and Sheldon, do you have any other passing comments or reflections on that you're going to take away with you from this?
Well, I love that stay awake, because I think we need to be alert to what our clients are sort of going through on a day-to-day basis, and almost mirror that and make sure that we are aware of what that is, and even if it's technology, but topics and issues that we need to sort of be mindful of, and therefore be better prepared to help them with.
Thank you, Sheldon. Saiyyidah?
Thank you. And it's interesting because the conversation around staying awake has led me to staying open. You know, and reflecting on the piece about being overwhelmed, I kind of sensed that a little bit as well, because there is just so much richness here and a lot of questions. And I suppose I'm kind of thinking we kind of discussed meeting your clients where they are, but I think there's also something about meeting ourselves where we are and being kind to ourselves and kind of saying, okay, so we know that we're on this journey of expanding and learning about learning and innovation, but being gentle with ourselves as we do it. Because I know for me, you know, there's so many ways that I could wish to explore this. And if I start to think about all of those, I won't do anything. So pick one. And I think that's what I'll be reflecting on afterwards. Which one thing am I going to lean into a little bit more and expand that and see where I go from there. So thank you for allowing me to share that, Shelley. Thank you.
Thank you, Saiyyidah. You know, listening to all of you, seeing so many familiar faces and so many new ones, and reading the comments, it really does remind me, and I'm sure Denise would agree with me, of how far we have come with the GPS since it was first started, and Mary was there as well. And the original and ongoing intention of the GPS, which was to get together as coaches, mentors, and supervisors, and generously share, because it is generous, our individual and collective experience and thoughts of this wonderful profession we're part of. So thank you not only to our session hosts and the organizers, of course, but thank you to all of you who are present today and the contribution you made. So that will take us now into our networking session. So again, thank you so much, Mary, Liz, Saiyyidah, and Sheldon, for leading such an amazingly rich conversation.